What is up, podheads? Tony here. Patio Slave Podcast, episode 97 with Anthony and Nate. How you guys doing?
Gentlemen, start your engines. 97, baby. It's Anthony. I am doing awesome, except Bob Saget died. Rest in peace.
Yeah, that's a bummer. That's a bummer, man.
Yeah, I was so pumped, and that you just brought it to back down to earth. Yeah, too soon. Great guy. Got to see him this past summer. He opened for Bill Burr in LA at the Wiltern Theater. Great show. Yeah, rest in peace, Bob Saget, man. Family man / America's Funniest Home Videos.
I mean, he was, for our generation, he was kind of like a de facto extra dad, right? Because of the Full House thing, and then just being the guy to host America. He was always on TV hosting America's Funniest Home Videos. One of the first iterations of that show. And then we found out he was a little bit dirty. I remember seeing him on Entourage. He was dirty there too. It was fun to find out that it's like when you find out your dad's a human and not just your dad, okay, you're also kind of like me. All right, cool. But yeah, rest in peace, Bob. We obviously all grew up with Full House and that stuff. So not the happiest thing, and it's not music related per se, but we love comedy too, and we're nerds, so we're fans of that. But rest in peace, Bob Saget.
A 90s OG, a true 90s OG.
Truth. Yep.
Or is it 80s? As we found last week with Rob, you don't know your decades, right? Mm-hmm. Was it Tracy Chapman?
Yeah, 88.
Oh yeah.
So maybe Full House was late 80s.
Now I'm gonna look it up.
Nate, maybe you actually like the 80s and not the 90s, and you're just
confused on the decade. Back to the Future is the 90s OG. No, I'm just kidding. That I know. That I do know.
You want to know the year it started, Nate?
Yeah.
1987.
There you go.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's too
Majority 90s though, right? So
yes, for sure.
About half. Yeah, about half. A little more than half.
But last week's episode was a lot of fun. Glad to have Rob back. And Rob, if you're listening, obviously open invite to come down to the Patio Slave, the hanging spot here. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, did he make the cut? Is he the fourth host?
Oh, that's right. We never settled that.
Nope, it's still Greg.
It's Greg.
Sorry.
Greg.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob.
But now we have a couple people who've come on more than once, so that's fun too. He definitely, obviously, you just listened to last week's episode. If you did, thank you. And we're comfortable with Rob, right? I mean, we've all known him for years, and a lot of why we're friends is music. So pretty cool to have him come on our medium and do this, because we love doing this, and he fits right in.
Yeah, he fits right in. Brings a different perspective coming in from the 80s, of course. And hot takes on.
He was born in the
stuff.
70s, though. He's a 70s OG.
He is a 70s OG. But it's always a decade later, right? 70s, but you're kind of representing the 80s. We're born in the 80s, or at least me, representing the 90s had.
So, Nate, you love your 90s OGs.
Yeah.
And this past week, we kind of had like a unintentional 90s, kind of tribute theme on our social media, on our Instagram. And one of those bands is actually, that we posted about, is who we're going to chat about tonight. The band is the one, the only Weezer. We're talking about 2 albums tonight, the Blue Album and Pinkerton. Surprise, surprise, right? Actually, those were the only 2 in the 90s that they put out, right?
Yeah.
Yes, because they took a 5-year hiatus after Pinkerton dropped. Rivers went back to school and was disenfranchised with the music industry for a little while. So before we got the Green Album, right? Because Weezer loves their colors and loves their seasons, as we'll find out later this year. But these are the 2 that obviously that hit first. Blue putting them on the map, Pinkerton being the follow-up to that. And we've always talked about it, debated it. We have different feelings on the 2 albums between the 3 of us. We decided, let's do a tale of the tape. Let's figure out once and for all which one wins. So we came up with 9 categories?
That's right. We
9 different categories. And we'll kind of give our reasons as to why we pick what we pick throughout and figure out once and for all which one's the better album, which obviously is totally subjective, and to everybody it's going to be different. But if you're along for the ride with us, maybe you'll come at it with a different light after you listen to us talk about it. So that being said, we want to start with the first category, boys.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first category is best song. So Nate, want to jump in, lead us off? Best song, Blue Album?
Yeah, so best song, Blue Album. This is a tough one. It's a great album. The collection of songs is very cohesive. This one actually surprisingly wasn't so hard for me. I'm a pretty indecisive person by nature, but I
No
think I just
way.
really, yeah, I know for real. But this song for me was is my favorite or my personal best song off the Blue album. It is "The World Has Turned and Left Me Here."
Wow.
Great,
Yeah,
great track.
amazing track.
I do love this track.
Mhm.
I did not have that, but I'm with you. It's a really great track. The album itself, you're right, is very cohesive. There isn't a lot of misses. It's 10 songs. It's pretty short, about 41
Mhm.
minutes, I think, and it just doesn't really miss as far as the way it's sequenced even, and it's a great album. But The World Has Turned and Left Me Here, great song. What's that, track 2?
Track 3.
Track 3.
Track 3.
Track 3.
Yeah.
No one else is 2. My favorite song or best song on this album would be My Name Is Jonas.
Nice.
And I had trouble with it, but I love that song, and it's just so good. There's kind of, listening back to it in prep for this, there's kind of this kind of grungy, almost like folk grunge hum to songs on the Blue album, which I love. It's got a foot in the grunge world coming out of the early 90s, but is different than that. It's like garagey and a little folk at times, and I think this song kind of fits. I would call it a folk grunge song, if that's even a thing.
Well, according to Wikipedia, they are known as geek rock, which was a new subgenre that I just learned about.
I didn't know that. Nice.
That's interesting. I personally haven't heard, when I listen back to it, I don't really hear that. I hear heavy Beach Boys. I hear heavy, there's actually elements of Queen later in the album. I hear, who else? Beatles. I mean.
Yep.
There's some Kiss guitar worship too.
Yeah. And the Cars, I mean, obviously there's influence there.
There's some Cars influence there, yeah.
For me, this one, I think this is like a basic pick, but it is the best song. It's Say It Ain't So.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't know, you guys might have been with me. I remember being downtown Portland at a bar late one night, cover band, and they start playing Say It Ain't So. And it could have just been that night or whatever, but I remember in that moment thinking, this is a top 15 song all time. It's that good. It's just, comes in slow. You can almost barely hear Rivers in the verses. Listen back. It's really quiet, and we'll get into that in the production. And then the monster choruses. It just comes in. It's one of the most monster choruses I've ever heard in my life, and it still holds up. So I got to go best song, Say It Ain't So, by a lot, but this album has a ton of great songs. Say It Ain't So, final answer.
All right. I like that we all have different ones because there's only 10 songs on there. The fact that we have different songs is pretty interesting because it could have. I mean, I almost picked Surf Wax America, another song.
Yeah.
Right. I love that song. There's just, and Only in Dreams is great. So yeah, you could go on all day, and I guess ask me next week and I'd tell you a different song, but
Totally.
that's, yeah. So the best song for us on Blue we've given you now. Let's give our best songs on Pinkerton, and then let's figure out if we like Blue versus Pinkerton, right?
Yep.
What do you got, Nate?
Yeah, so I'll kick it off here since I'm a little bit more of an advocate. Best song, personally, it's actually a single, but quintessential and it's just an all-time track. The Good Life, amazing song. It actually could be almost like a Blue album song in a lot of ways. But yeah, I love this track, and sometimes I'll skip to this track purposely. I think it's that good, So yeah, that's mine.
I love that song, and it was between that and El Scorcho for me, and I picked El Scorcho.
Oh, nice.
I think that is those two songs are the highlight of the album, the back-to-back, right in the middle of the album. I definitely think that Weezer, and we'll get into the production stuff a little later, they could be Blue album songs, and I kind of wish they were at times because I think I'd like them even more, but I love them. I mean, I've said on numerous pods, they're two all-time Weezer songs on Pinkerton, El Scorcho and The Good Life, and yeah, I picked El Scorcho.
So we're gonna be 2 albums in a row where we all have different songs. So I was deciding between El Scorcho and Why Bother. I landed with Why Bother because I think it sounds like a Blue album, and I mean I'm looking at my notes here, and that's literally what I wrote down. So I think we kind of wish this was on the Blue album. I mean,
wow.
Is that kind of a preview of how this thing's gonna land?
Maybe.
Nate's like, better not be.
Okay, so which one, if you had to pick of your 2 songs, which one do you think gets the nod over the other one?
I'm going to speak up here. So we're looking at two different songs, two different times for the band. Blue Album 94, Pinkerton 96. So you got to kind of factor in that not only is the band progressing, but like it's just a different time in music. So although Good Life does very much fit the Blue Album kind of ethos, I think overall I like both songs a lot. And I think they both kind of have the same kind of sing-along melody. But The World Has Turned and Left Me Here is, for me, an overall better song, and just takes the crown over the two at least.
One vote for the Blue Album.
Yep.
All right, between the two songs that I chose, I'm going to go with My Name Is Jonas. It's probably, I don't know if it's my favorite Weezer song of all time, but it's one or two. So it's going to beat anything off of Pinkerton. Blue Album for me. My Name Is Jonas.
This is so easy. Say It Ain't So. It's their best song on the album, their best song, and I don't know if I'd say top 15, but it's an all-time song.
All right. What's the next category we got? We got best production. I think this will be a landslide, honestly. Mm-hmm. Nate, what do you think about the production?
I mean, the production. So first of all, Weezer, the Blue Album is obviously the debut album, right? So this is like our introduction to this mega band, Weezer, with an amazing debut produced by Rick Ocasek from the Cars, which is one of my favorite bands from the 80s. So it's like kind of like this perfect package. And I don't even really remember Rick Ocasek doing any production work previous to this. So it's kind of a unique situation in that sense. But the production's flawless on this album. We mentioned Beatles earlier. This is like a Beatles album production wise. It just flows together. It's clean. It's like very much so written in a writing session that's supposed to be one album. I almost wonder, like, sometimes, like, was there any B-sides? Because every song seems like it was supposed to be on this album. So I don't know if there was a blueprint, no pun intended, to make this album. Like, it seems like everything was mapped out perfectly, down to the artwork, down to the production. So yeah, I mean, I think the production on this album is near mint.
I agree with you. And thinking about this today, I likened it to another band that had their first two albums around the same time frame, in the Counting Crows. They put out August and Everything After in 93, and they put out Recovering the Satellites in 96. August and Everything After, massive hit. Record did huge things, similar to Weezer Blue. And then the follow-up is a similar, like, jaded about the music industry and the fame that it's brought Rivers on the Pinkerton side and Adam Duritz on the Counting Crows side. But instead of producing it themselves, the Counting Crows had a producer to kind of help steer them a little bit, right? So, and like I said about the two great songs on Pinkerton, if they're at times a touch noisier than like anything you're going to hear on Blue, even though there is some noise on Blue. And I just want it to be scaled back just a little bit. And I think it would have helped to have a producer. It didn't necessarily need to be Rick Ocasek, but had it been somebody like him to say, no, guys, a little too much. Let's tamp this down here. Let's pick this up here. It might have gone a long way for my view of Pinkerton. So yeah, for me, Blue Album.
It's interesting. I don't think I notice a big gap between these two. I mean, it sounds like less so than you guys do. Like, I don't, from a production, mixing, mastering perspective, like, I don't hear a huge difference. I think where you hear the big difference is in when you get in like the Green Album. Like, that's huge night and day. I mean,
yeah,
I actually kind of dabbled with that album just to see how that was produced, actually kind of in prep for this. But I don't really notice. I mean, with the Blue Album, like I said, with Say It Ain't So, I wish they cranked Rivers' vocals up a little more in the verses. Now, maybe the way it is why the chorus hits, but I'd like to, maybe it was the headphones I was listening to the song in, but I could barely hear his vocals. Maybe that was intentional. I don't know. For me, it's a draw because I can't really tell.
That surprises me because I think Pinkerton's messy. I think there's spots in Pinkerton that had they just been a little cleaner and a little more time spent on it, maybe with somebody that had done it before, like as Weezer did it themselves. And I think maybe today they could do that and not be as big a deal. But for your follow up to your major, unless you wanted it to be messy like that, which I think Rivers did, and I get that it's an artistic choice, and there are great songs in there. Don't get me wrong, but I like the middle of the road between the really glossy and the really messy that I think Blue is. And You're right, Green is very glossy, and that was on purpose. That was the anti-Pinkerton, as Rivers said. But that's too much for me. Come back a little bit. Be a little bit gritty. Be a little bit funky. You don't have to necessarily be super perfect.
And I'm going on memory here. I think the Green Album was also Rick Ocasek, right? If I'm not wrong. But additionally, I'm looking at Pinkerton. I can't find a producer for Pinkerton, so I don't know if that means that was self-produced.
It was the band. It was the band.
Yeah, it was the band.
It was the band. Okay, because there's a ton of engineers, but there's no producer.
No, Weezer is a producer.
Okay,
you're right. Green Album was Rick Ocasek again.
All right, I was going off memory, a nerd memory.
So I think Nate and I think Blue Album. Twan, you're gonna go draw.
Yep. And I came at this from a sounding perspective. Now, obviously, Pinkerton is. I was going to say quirky. I would say it's perceived quirky, which that'll probably come up a little later. But
good tease. All right, we each probably have a highlight off of these records. Let's each give a quick synopsis of our. Let's give a highlight from each as we go. So, Nate, give one from both albums right now.
All right. So, biggest highlight for me on the Blue Album, which there's a lot. There's a lot of highlights on this album. Like we said, it's a front to back record, and there's a lot of moments on the album that are very unique to Weezer, kind of representing the 90s and just, I guess, the geek rock that we've mentioned earlier. That is they're one of a kind. They do their own thing, and that's why they are who they are. For me, though, the biggest highlight on the Blue Album is the build up in the song Only in Dreams. There's a crescendo on that song that just like you're waiting for it, and then it's happening, and then you're in it, and it's just like, boo, it's huge. I don't know, when you're listening, you almost feel like, I feel like I'm at a concert right now, even though you're just listening to the raw record. So that's my biggest highlight. I look forward to it every time, and it's obviously the last song on the record. So that's my biggest personal highlight for the Blue Album.
What about Pinkerton?
For Pinkerton, this is kind of a geek thing, I guess, fitting for us. It's almost like a what do you call it? Cameo in a movie where like there's the movie, there's the actors, and then there's like the actual real person in the movie, and you're like, oh, no way. So in El Scorcho, when he mentions Green Day and the girl not knowing who Green Day was, I'm like, this is cool because it's a song, but he's referencing an actual band that's also kind of parallel to their success, especially 96. I said, oh, you never heard of Green Day? How cool is that? I look forward to that every time, and it's a highlight because it. I don't know. I don't really know how to say it, but it makes the music more grounded. Like, oh, like it's still music, but it's
more real. It's relatable.
Still human.
Right?
Exactly. Yep.
Although, like you said, I don't know who the hell doesn't know Green Day, but so maybe it's not relatable.
Well, in 96, like everybody probably knew Green Day.
Exactly.
95 when he's writing that. And I mean, who hasn't been like, oh man, I asked this person I'm digging to go to this show with me, and you said you never heard of him. Like, shit, maybe this isn't gonna work out.
Yeah, been there, done that, actually. Yeah.
And he says, how cool is that? I was like, maybe it is gonna work out. We're different. I can teach you some stuff, you can teach me some stuff. Those are good, Nate. I have written down here, and I've got like 4 or 5 different ones on Blue that I love, but I had the Only in Dreams like crescendoing. That was like my favorite part of the record, because it is
nice.
Yeah, it is kind of. It's not just the song; it's the whole album too. It's the end of the album. You're like, man, what just happened? All right, let's start My Name Is Jonas over again. Like, I'm ready to go again. I love the harmonica-y thing that happens towards the end of My Name Is Jonas, when everything gets kind of loud and fresh out of batteries, but they're still making noise. I love that part too. It's just a great lyric. And Rivers does that throughout his songwriting days. It's all over the Weezer catalog, but it starts right there in that first song. So those 2 kind of come to mind for me. And then similar, I have just the back-to-back run of Good Life and El Scorcho on Pinkerton. It's like you said, Nate, I jump to those songs. Like if I'm going to listen to something, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to listen to those 2 songs because they just kick ass and they're great back-to-back. And I think they're the highlights of that record. And yeah, those are my highlights from those 2.
And think about how badass that was back in the day, in the days of tapes, where you had back-to-back songs. You're not fast-forwarding, you're not rewinding. It's like, all right, I'm going to let this ride, Yep. Although I didn't own it on cassette. I owned it on CD. So I approach this a little different. I kind of went with not songs or lyrics or solos or anything like that, with themes. For the Blue Album, I love the innocence of the whole thing. That it's their debut, that it's... that it's just it's just them. They're young and like take In the Garage. I mean, the simplicity and the innocence and the honesty of those lyrics. It's not something that, like, if they wrote those lyrics in 2020 or 2021, 2022, it'd be like they're trying too hard. But back then it was, this is us. We're young. This is what I'm feeling. With Pinkerton, love the mystery of it. Love the album artwork, the album title. I personally, to come back to the quirkiness thing, I don't think the album is all too quirky, but I do love the perceived quirkiness of it. Like there's this mystique to it where this is a, big different album for them, which I don't really see it too much. I think it has a lot of those songs could have been on Blue, but I love the whole mystery, the unknown. I never owned this, but it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't put a photo of themselves in that booklet. I don't know. Do you guys remember? Do they have a band photo?
I don't think they did.
Yeah, so there you go. The whole mystery of it. Overall, I think the innocence of the Blue album is what I would lean on for the highlight over the mystery of Pinkerton. So another one for Blue for me.
I think I'm gonna go with Pinkerton. I think that back-to-back songs, I mean, like I've said a million times, they're two of their best songs. And to have them back-to-back right in the middle of the record, almost like, oh man, I've gotten through these couple songs. I kind of like, this is kind of cool. I'm not sure where this is going. Oh wow, that song was awesome. And then boom, right into the next one. You're like, holy shit. All right. They've stepped their game up. Here we go. So that tape thing, Twan, that's perfect. Like I didn't own it on tape either. I had it on CD, but if you had bought it as a cassette, in 96 and you're in your car, and you're like, good. I don't have to fast forward. You don't ruin the tape. It's great. I'm giving this one to Pinkerton.
And those would be what? Side A or B? Those are what? Songs?
It might be right in the middle.
5 and 6? Yeah, so maybe you have to turn it over.
You might have to flip the tape over, but at least you don't have to fast forward or rewind.
That's so good. So the edge goes, oh, Nate, you get to go, right? Who do you give the edge to?
I'm going to go Blue album. Yeah.
All right, Blue in a huge lead right now.
Yeah.
Which I think we kind of thought might happen, but at the same time, it's nice to talk these things out. All right, next category, critical acclaim.
Yes.
I think we can just talk about this instead of what we think, right? This is just more of a what people thought out there. In the moment, Blue, obviously. Today, I might say Pinkerton. I might say the critics have turned on it and been like, this is amazing. You guys are idiots. But in the moment, it was mixed. Not everybody loved it, but everybody loved Blue when it came out. Everybody still loves Blue today, but it hasn't changed a ton, I don't think. Whereas I think people have been like, wow, this is actually way better than you guys. You didn't get it in 96. Now you get it today.
You're right. It wasn't a cult classic when it dropped. It wasn't. It turned into that. One thing I will point out, though, is there's a certain website that's often very negative and very critical gave this a 10.0, and that's Pitchfork. Whoa. In 97. They revisited the Blue album. They gave it a 10.0, which I think for me, that's like all that needs to be said. I mean, that's the ultimate critic, right? Where Pinkerton, like I said, was very mixed, and I don't even know if the band liked it, right? It wasn't Rivers.
Yeah, he wasn't happy.
He thought it was a mistake and whatnot. But on the flip side is, if the critics loved it, he probably wouldn't have thought that way.
I think he thought it was a mistake in the moment.
In the moment, yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think now he's like, nah, that was me, and that's where I was at, and I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Weezer, what a case study. I feel like I'm always saying case study. But, I mean, the Blue album came out in 94 in the midst of, heavy grunge guitars, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains. So you have that, you're kind of going against the grain. You put out this, like, pop sensibility, Beatles type sing along album, geek rock, I guess, like we mentioned, with a very plain cover, but it was a hit, and it's for a reason. So I think critical acclaim it was filling a niche that no one even knew needed to be filled. And there we go, Weezer, Blue album. And then you throw in Pinkerton 96. I think label and fan alike were like, oh, we're ready for Blue album part 2. This polished sing along Beatles second album, like this should follow the same kind of cadence, but it's not. It's a dark album, and I think everyone was confused. Critics, fans, I guess even the band. We did some personal research, all three of us, and it seems like the band was in a weird spot too. Rivers was kind of double duty with his time at Harvard while writing this album, and in between tours. So I mean, you got to imagine, like, man, you're at Harvard. You're a rock star, but you're also trying to, I don't know, not fall in that sophomore slump category. So the pressure must be immense. I mean, just being at Harvard is probably pretty substantial pressure, but to write a sophomore album that is somehow bigger than the Blue album, which is this monster debut album, I can't imagine. I can't imagine being in that headspace. I can't imagine that pressure from a record label in the 90s where it was, there was a lot of pressure. Like you have to outdo what you've done somehow, because you've already kind of built this new music category under the rock music guys. He probably didn't know what to do. So it's very much an autobiography of the times. And I think that's why it's special, but it's also hard for everyone, critics included, to put an accurate assessment on the album during that time frame. Fast forward to 2022, it's like a cult classic movie that bombed in the movie theaters, but now everyone regards as like this amazing piece of artwork that, is finally getting praised for what it was trying to represent, which was just honesty. So critical acclaim in that sense is a very dynamic discussion. So great albums. And I almost feel for Rivers in that sense.
Well, you mentioned he's in school trying to write another hit album that he, after the heels of one that was already a hit, and he's famous. Like now people know who he is. He's been all over MTV with numerous music videos and different countdowns and all that stuff. So to be, anonymous was not a thing for him anymore.
So for me, I got to go Blue. For as far as critical acclaim, and not just because of the Pitchfork thing. I just kind of mentioned that because it's funny, because they, dog everything. But I think that's kind of the cherry on the top, where I don't know if I've seen that. I don't read a ton of Pitchfork, but I don't think they're handing out 10s. But I always kind of viewed Pinkerton as the kind of the mixed review in the moment, and then it's turned into a cult classic. But I think I got to give the nod to Blue.
I think I got to give it to Pinkerton. Weird. I don't know how. I didn't think this was going to happen to me tonight, but I think this was, through the Today lens, regarded, and not necessarily by me, I'm saying just critically regarded as a great piece of artwork, and seminal in the Weezer catalog, where obviously in the moment it was not that. I ride for Blue. I would rather Blue. I think Blue is the better album, just from front to back. But I think critically, I think Pinkerton wins this round for me.
Yeah, that's where my head went to, just because, Blue album is almost a given. I think even at the time in 94, it was like, oh, this is a great album, great songs, easy to promote. There's not a whole lot of resistance on getting this on the radio. It's very radio friendly. Whereas Pinkerton is like, man, like, how are we going to promote this shit? Even the album cover is like, what does this mean? Is this even representing the music at all? No, definitely not. But I think the only comparison I can give that gives this any kind of grounds is the movie Fight Club. When it dropped in 1999, it bombed. Critics were like, this is a terrible movie. The storyline is sickening, or whatever, Siskel and Ebert give it 2 thumbs down rather than 2 thumbs up kind of thing. But now Fight Club's regarded as one of the most popular cult classic movies of all time, because it's a masterpiece. And so I think Pinkerton falls into that category because it wasn't supposed to be so mainstream. It wasn't supposed to be like this front and center family oriented film. And I think that's what Pinkerton is. It's talking about some very dark subject matter, but like we were alluding to earlier, it's representing where Rivers was and the band was at the time. So like, if it wasn't that, the music wouldn't be representing any kind of honesty. It would just be they could write the Blue album part 2 if they really wanted to. They probably had B-sides and, to do so. Yeah. So yeah, critical acclaim. I'm going to go Pinkerton too.
Pinkerton wins a category.
Yeah, finally. I
was going to say, felt like Geffen Records Street Team couldn't work Pinkerton.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
You said something, Nate, that I think we all like Fight Club, and I'm not here to bash Fight Club. That has now turned again. People are anti that. There's a vast online community of that too. So, like anything, popular till it isn't, till it is again, till it isn't again. Yeah. We're just gonna keep that cycle for the rest of our lives. But I'm with you. I think Pinkerton. We both pick Pinkerton, so Pinkerton wins a category finally. Good job, guys. Good effort. All right, so commercial success. I think this one's an easy one because it's numbers and they don't really lie, right? I think Blue album was so, in the moment, obviously sold better.
Yeah, Blue album went triple platinum in the U.S. I think I saw 15 million worldwide, but 3 million, 3 times platinum U.S. And Pinkerton didn't go platinum until 2016, which is shocking to me.
Yeah.
I almost don't believe those numbers, especially in the streaming era. Like, man, I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked by is that the Blue Album has sold more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm surprised about that too, given how we used to buy records. We would hear a single, or we wouldn't even care if we heard the single. Like if it was a band we liked, we'd go buy it anyway. So I don't know what happened between 96 and when we were buying records in 99 going forward, but we would have made that album go platinum just on the sake of we're a big fan of the band name brand. So that is surprising, very surprising.
Well, the other thing to think about is I bought the Blue Album back in the day. I've probably listened to it on Spotify enough to warrant another purchase. You know what I mean? Enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, man, I'm just surprised.
So you've listened to it 300,000 times on Spotify? Because that would be one purchase, right?
1 million listens of Say It Ain't So.
Yeah. Good work. No, that it's numbers speak for themselves. It was a better selling record. It debuted higher. I think it debuted it got to 16. It peaked at 16 in the US versus 19 for Pinkerton. Yeah, it's just numbers don't lie. So Blue Album gets the category.
Yep, commercial success, Blue Album over Pinkerton. But kind of brought me to another point though, and I think any guest that we've had on the podcast can probably attest to this, that debuted album, the label's all in, right? They're like, hey, chips are on the table. Like, let's make this a success. Whereas sophomore album, they're almost leaning on the band to pull some weight and maybe even pulling back on the promotional side.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Why didn't they force him to get a producer?
Right? Yeah, I don't know.
That kind of surprises me.
Well, that kind of doubles down on Nate's point where they leaned on the band. You guys have the recipe apparently. Blue Album was great, was a success. Now do what you did again. And Rivers in his dorm room studying for a test, wondering what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
All right, that was an easy one. 3-0 Blue Album on that. Album art. What do you think, Nate?
All right, so this is a tough one for me because I am a huge fan of less is more and simplicity. And the Blue Album is as simple as it gets. It's the band standing in front of a teal background.
No, blue, because they have a teal album that comes out later.
That's true. I guess it's blue, but it's of a teal.
Wait,
rendering.
have you been reacting to the wrong album this whole time?
Teal album.
It's like Weezer's cover of Toto Africa is the best cover of all time.
Of all time, the GOAT. So I know. I think this album cover was perfect for this album. It represents it very well. Easily signable, right? You get to sign above the band member type thing. I collect autographs. But I also collect posters, and the artwork that's represented with Pinkerton, I have like 6 posters in a set, even though they're not Weezer related, that I buy that I have in my possession. I think it's the same artist. It's a Japanese type visual. Very cool, very intriguing. And I love it, but I don't know what I like better because they're both polar opposite. So kind of what Twan said earlier, I think I'm going to draw on this one. Like I have a hard time deciding because they're essentially polar opposite directional wise. But here's the thing. Does the Pinkerton album artwork represent the album? Not really. Does the Blue Album represent the Blue Album? Yeah, 100%. So I'm divided.
So you give it a tie.
Yeah.
You half changed my mind just by the way you explained that, but I'm going to stick with my guns. Yeah. I think Pinkerton wins because I like the album art better for that kind of, it looks like a place that you might be isolated, and the music kind of fits like everybody knows me, but I'm alone all the time type of feeling that you get from Pinkerton. I think it fits the record a little bit better than maybe you do, but the Blue Album and the aesthetic fits the Blue Album perfectly. So as far as fitting the albums, yes, I think you're right. Probably a tie, but I think overall what it meant to be to everybody else out in the world and what it was used for. And it leans into the Madame Butterfly stuff too, which is the closing track on the record is Butterfly. I think that one fits. I think Pinkerton wins this one for me.
Yeah, one thing, Nate, you said in a previous episode with Pinkerton is it draws you in. It makes you want to know like what's going on. You want to be in that artwork and wonder what the hell's going on because it's intriguing. And that has always appealed to me. And I do think that it fits the theme, that I mentioned earlier with Pinkerton, which is the mystery. There's like this kind of mystery theme. So I think it actually does fit the album. I'm with you, Tone. Now with the Blue Album, we've said this all before. It's basic, it's iconic, it fits the vibe. But one thing that I think they've taken away from it is that they've doubled down on it so many goddamn times, where I think all the jokey spin-offs and the teals and all that, it's taken away from the original. You know, I can't look at the Blue album the same light because, 15 years later he's wearing a cowboy hat, So
yes, the Red album. Yes.
The Red album. So I got to go Pinkerton just because there's, I do think it fits it maybe more than you think, Nate, but it fits the whole mysterious vibe.
That's a good point about the different doubling down version, the White album, the Red album, the Green album, the Black album, the Teal album. Like, okay, we get it, guys.
Yeah, no, great assessment. And I think it worked with the Green album, and I think it even worked with Make Believe with the Black album. But at the same time, yeah, it's like I think we talked about this a few episodes ago. Like, Weezer has something so special, but they make a parody of it, and then it's hard to take seriously. And it's like, why are you taking away from your own masterpiece? It's very confusing for a fan.
It gets people talking about it too. I mean, that's what they've always been able to do since after the hiatus, after Pinkerton, was keep people engaged in some way, shape, or form. Whether it be, did you see that ridiculous mustache on Rivers, the cowboy hat on the Red album, or oh cool, a dog flying across Ratitude? Like, what's happening here? And just that type of stuff. But like, then you go put the record on and you find 4 songs that are like, these are great. Like, do I wish that there were 4 more songs on this record like this? Totally. And maybe the other 6 are not something for me, but there's enough here to keep me interested. I'll come back next time because they continue to find ways to put out 4, 5, 6 songs an album that are good or great depending on the album.
And at least with the Green album, they changed the angle, the camera angle.
Yeah.
So who gets the nod there? It's Pinkerton, right?
Pinkerton, yeah. I think you and I both went Pinkerton. So
wow,
close. Yeah, we get a little bit of a comeback story here.
Can we say that about their career?
I mean, I don't know that they've ever really gone away. All right, so we got now. Which one do we think has aged better? Nate, what do you got?
It's another tough one. All right, so I think the Blue album has aged very well, mainly because right out of the gate in '94 to when I discovered this album, it definitely wasn't in '94. I think I discovered this album in '96, maybe '97, and it had already aged well to that point. And I listen to it every year like clockwork, and it ages well, almost better. I'd say it ages better over time just because it brings you back and it's got some fond memories attached to it. So the Blue album ages perfectly. I mean, it's just great. And then you see them live and you're like, you're stoked to hear anything off the Blue album, which they obviously play a lot of songs off of it. I think that's why a lot of people go to see them. Similar, Pinkerton ages well in a completely different direction, whereas what we were alluding to earlier, where this album was not a commercial success, you had to really listen to this album pretty deeply to have any kind of appreciation for it, whether you went with a trend or not. So it's a hard one, and the production is very raw and it's very heavy. I think it's also aged well to an extent. It's hard to decide what has aged better. I guess I would say Blue album just because of its overall cohesive front to back part to it. Whereas the Pinkerton album, there is some, not filler, but it's arguably very up and down. So yeah, I think it's aged, but Blue album has aged better. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the Blue album continues to be and is probably their masterpiece, which, I mean, they've put out great songs since then. But as far as between these two, I don't reach for Pinkerton. I always would reach for Blue over Pinkerton. And this comes up with replayability down the road. But it's because it's still fits for me. It's still viable. It's the songs still kick ass. There's nothing I want to skip. Like, I can put it on, 41 minutes goes by and I'm like, cool, happy I did that. Can't wait to do it again. Or I don't get that vibe from, and I'm answering the replayability one we have coming up, but it's the same idea, right? I mean, it's just the reason I want it is because it still fits for me. It still aged well versus Pinkerton, which I like the 2 songs, and the rest of it I could kind of be okay with not listening to. So
yeah, I mean, I'm gonna probably sound like a broken record here, but with Blue, those songs are timeless. You could dump those in any decade. You could dump a lot of those songs a decade or two before or after or now, and they'd still hit. And I think that the Blue Album, it's maintained its superiority after all these years. It hasn't fallen off. I don't think it's, well, according to Pitchfork, it's perfect. So maybe it has aged even better. But with Pinkerton, maybe there's some questionable lyrics in there. The sound of the album musically, I think, has gotten better with age. But as far as which has aged better, probably Blue. Give the nod to Blue again.
All three of us picked Blue.
Yep.
So much for that comeback story. Blue is coming around the last turn here, maintaining its distance.
Running out of time. I know, and I answered the last question we had too. So, all right, next one. It's impact or influence, and/or influence. What do you think about both of their albums, Impact and Influence, Nate?
Bigger influence, because kind of synopsis of this question. I think this is a two-part, right? Because Blue Album is very conducive to almost a full subgenre. It's basically Beatles 2.0. You have sing-along pop sensibility songs that could be covered by anyone, really. Timeless, like you just said, Twan. So that holds its own, I think in a lot of ways. It doesn't matter if you're heavy or soft or folk or country or whatever. Like, it's just, these are songs that are foundationally easy to transfer to really anyone and anything. Pinkerton is so far removed from that it's almost a completely different influence category, where I know that there's bands that have spawned from the Pinkerton era alone. So I'm almost going to go a draw on this one, just because it is almost it's like two parts of your brain. It's like you got grunge and then you got rock or pop. So I don't really know where I stand on this. And I almost feel like this is a great question for some of the bands that we bring on for interviews. Like, where do you stand? Because I think a lot of people are actually going to pick Pinkerton despite our assessment here, just because it's so far removed from the Blue Album, but in their interest personally as musicians. So it's a little, again, divided.
That's a great call. And I kind of had it divided too, and thinking about it, but hearing you talk, I think I got to give the nod to Pinkerton. I think it is probably a lot of bands around, people that are our age-ish and maybe a little bit older, they probably derive a lot from that if they're in sort of a poppy rock type, genre, Jimmy World, stuff like that. They can look at that as kind of not the first emo record, but an emo record that was a pop emo record that kind of gives them a chance to do both versus just straight up, emo in a different aspect. So I think I got to give the nod to Pinkerton on that, just because of that. I think it influenced a lot of bands that I also love.
This is a tough one, because I think Weezer in general, up to that point, so like imagine after 2000 never happened, but up to that point, I think they showed how cool it was to not be cool. Maybe more so than any band up to that point. No rock star bullshit, just stripped down rock. And I mean, you see it with the album cover of Blue, right? So I think that's just in general with both of these albums. With the Blue Album, we talk about impact and influence. Everyone has covered Say It Ain't So. Deftones has covered Say It Ain't So. They're huge into Weezer. I remember there's a live video where Chino's like, we'll play any song by that band. Like, he literally says that. Panic at the Disco covered it. Further Seems Forever. Shout out Chad Neptune, episode 19 guest.
19, yeah.
They covered it. So, I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. With Pinkerton, it's interesting. I think that's an album that I think gave a lot of bands clearance to go left when everyone was expecting to stay the course. And I can't think of, like, I'm putting on the spot, I can't think of many other bands off the top of my head that did that, but I think they made it okay to do that, especially at the major label level. Now, if I think of present day, I think, you look at maybe some of the bands on like Run for Cover, wouldn't surprise me if they're influenced by Pinkerton or even the Blue Album. So, man, I couldn't decide earlier and I can't decide now. I'm going draw. I'm going draw.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned it a lot on here. It's like a Venn diagram. Like the Blue album has its own Venn diagram, and Pinkerton has its own Venn diagram, right? Because the Pinkerton album, essentially, I think to your point, Tone, spawns a whole new category of music, which is like emo, where the Blue album is kind of almost piggybacking on the Beatles, but Pinkerton is really just creating something that had never really been done before. And they're both kind of uncool in their own way, right? Blue album's very geeky. Pinkerton's almost like, I don't even know, depressing, dark emo. It's really just an emo precursor to emo.
Well, I wouldn't say precursor. I think emo's around at this point. It just isn't necessarily a mainstream band doing it. And that's kind of part of it. Is there's some bands around this time that are doing that, but no one expected it from Weezer after the Blue album. That's the thing. Yeah. Like Twan says, they were allowed to take a left turn versus stay on the course, and that's a great way to think of it. And that's I'm happy. I think Pinkerton is it because of that, something like that. So you guys are tie. So we'll give half a point for you guys. I'm giving it a point. That's 2-1. Pinkerton wins that round. They're still alive.
Nice.
All right, replay value. I've essentially given my thoughts. It's Blue album all day for me. So Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, replay value. Okay, so I think I agree with you, Tone. I mean, Blue album, again, mainly because the Beatles comparison is very much front and center. If there's a pop sensibility with lyrics that are easy to sing, and there's kind of like this overall theme of, even if the lyrics aren't happy, the music's happy, and therefore like it's easy to play for anyone that's in the room, so it doesn't matter. Whereas Pinkerton, like, you know, it's like for me putting on one of the darkest Pearl Jam albums, like it's gonna turn some heads. You know, you gotta like, you can't just, it's not universal. It's not something you play on touch tunes at the bar. You're like, man, hopefully people are into this. Whereas the Blue album, it's like, it doesn't matter because even just the music is pop enough to get everyone going. So I'm not going to say sadly, but the Blue album is kind of just an easy check mark. Whereas Pinkerton, like, you know, you got to be at the right bar. You got to be at the right craft beer bar to be like, all right, is this cool? I know this is cool here, but it's definitely not cool at the sports bar across the street.
Tangent time. Nate and I remember once being at Amigos, which is a dive bar in Portland that we love and frequented many times, and put a song on by 9 Inch Nails on the touch tunes and got vetoed by the bartender.
No.
We were like 15 seconds into it. He and I are the only ones that are into it, obviously, on like a Saturday night at a pretty busy time of the evening. And the bartender just changed the song on us. Like, give us our $1 back, you asshole.
Yeah, we paid for that.
Are you sure it wasn't Pinkerton? Because that album definitely has some skips for me.
yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, I got to go Blue. We say front to back. It's if it's not front to back, it's pretty close. There's no song that I can really think of off the top of my head where I'm skipping. Where Pinkerton has some skips. So replay, it's landslide Blue.
Those are our 9. Those are our 9 categories that we had for this tonight. It looks as though the Blue album is won 6-3, which is closer than I thought it would be.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah, and going into this, I thought, man, I'm just going to be like Blue album, Blue album, Blue album. Sorry, I can't pick Pinkerton for anything because I just think the Blue album is superior in every way. But I'm kind of glad we did this exercise because it gives me a different appreciation for the music, the time frame, and then today, where it's at today, and even where they're at as a band today. So they kind of needed this album to be what they are today and to continue to be viable, and they are. I mean, people still talk about them. We're talking about them today too. So, yeah, surprised but happy.
It's an interesting career trajectory. I mean, like I said, I don't think Pinkerton is as quirky as everyone thinks it is, but let's just assume it is. They kind of go this more pop rock, you know, lean on the Beatles, lean on Beach Boys, whatever, go to this quirky album, and then they completely double down on maybe what worked the first time with, you know, but more polished with Green Album. I'm trying to think of other bands that maybe did something similar, and I'd have to really think about it, but it's unique. And then obviously we've talked about where they went from there several times, but for those first 3 albums, you almost would naturally flip-flop the second and third album where they would get poppier, and they're like, all right, well, I want to get out of the limelight now. I want to do my own thing. I'm out of the record deal. You know, my deal with Geffen's over. So it's interesting.
That's a great assessment because, yeah, it would go Blue album, Green album, maybe even a third album, and then they're dropped from the label, and then Pinkerton's like their independent release or something.
I mean, what came out after the Green album? Was it Make Believe or was it Maladroit?
Maladroit.
which is funky and a little weird too, right? They go super glossy, super clean, radio hits left and right, and then you get Maladroit, which is a little bit kind of the same, not the same, but a difference from where they were
Metal
on
riffs,
the
right?
on the green album. Yeah, metal riffs and a Burnt Jam. Is Burnt Jam on that record? I fucking love that song. It's a great Weezer song. This Dope Nose. Dope Nose was the single. Is that on there?
Yeah, Burnt Jam is track 7.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dope Nose and Keep Fishing. I remember
Keep Fishing. Yeah, those were the radio hits, but they're yeah, that's a cool record too, and they like to do the metal riffs. I mean, they just put an album out last year called Van Weezer, so they're there. But yeah, they're an interesting case study, as Nate says, and we'll probably talk about them again. But I'm happy we did this exercise because these two records are probably their most talked about too, but also ones that we've spent the most time with, being the age we are and where we were as music fans when they came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it highlights, the art form, which is, it's not always ABC. It's, well, where are you? What time is it? What year is it? What's your brain chemistry in the moment? Are you going to write that? Or are you going to follow the man and be like, hey, make Blue Album Part 2, which is the easy way out. But if you're a true creative, you're going to do what you want. And yeah, you happen to sign to a record label to get better distribution, but is that really why you're doing it? And I think Weezer has proven that you don't have to go that route. You can put out the Blue Album, have this massive success, go back to college and put out Pinkerton, which is so far removed from Pinkerton, it's not even funny. So like you said, great exercise. I don't think I would have ever thought this deeply into what we were doing if we had not done this. So I hope we do this again.
Is there another album out there that's almost done a complete 180 in like the broader public's eyes than Pinkerton? It's turned into this cult classic. It really is. I mean, look it up. I mean, it's one of these, trying to think if like Deftones fans loved Self-Titled or something, something, maybe it was a little different of a record that just hit with people. Like Def Leppard Slang, that was their like grunge type album. In the moment, people hated it. Now it's like some people ride hard for it.
Yeah, there's probably I'm sure there's some. I'm drawing a blank right now. If you guys know of any out there, email us or hit us up on Twitter, or Instagram. But we because we would do this again for another band that, especially like looking back on those albums that maybe didn't quite hit in the moment, but then turned into these cult classics that people love. It happens with music, it happens with movies, it happens with books, happens everywhere in all these mediums. All right, that's a good place to wrap it, I think. We really appreciate you checking us out. If it's your first time, hit us up on any of these social medias at Podioslave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Go to podioslavepodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. We are active on all of those platforms. We've got some stuff percolating behind the scenes. We might have an interview in the next couple of weeks that we're hoping for. And if not, we're going to nerd. We'll do this. We have more of these ideas that we're going to do. So really appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
Yeah, man. 2022 is our year. We've gotten to a really special place, and the success and the fun and everything that goes along with it, promotional wise and guest wise, just keeps getting better. So I'm looking forward to the future. So this is something to look forward to in a turbulent time. So to all the nerds out there and my fellow co-hosts, rock on, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
We'll see you next week.
Peace, potheads.